Welcome to today's tutorial where we are going to discuss the basics of the AND function in Microsoft Excel. I know that this function is usually used together with the if function, but we will make a tutorial on how to combine multiple logical functions in Excel to show you exactly what you can do with these functions. But for today's tutorial, we will be focusing on the AND function and how this logical function works in Excel. So before I show you an example of this, let's quickly discuss how the AND function works. So the purpose of the AND function is to test multiple conditions, and it will only return the true statement if all of the arguments evaluate to true. If one of the logical arguments that we are entering returns as a false, our return value will be false. So from this table and illustration, you can see exactly how this will work. So input A will be our logical argument number 1, and input B will be our logical argument number 2. And if either of these arguments are false, our output will return as a false. And I know this is a lot of information, but once we do our example, this will all be clarified and this will all make sense on how the AND function works. Our example of the AND function today, we are going to use 3 logical arguments to input into our AND function to achieve a true or false output. So I know on the previous slide that you guys saw, it only stated 2 inputs, an A and a B input, but with the AND function, you can use from 1 input all the way up to round about 250 logical arguments in your AND function. I'm not completely sure about the top value there, but I know you can use a lot of arguments to achieve your true or false output on your AND function. So for this tutorial, we are going to stick to these 3 logical arguments. So our first argument is going to be we want our value to be larger than 0. We want it to be larger than 45 and smaller than 65. So I've written down our logical arguments here so that you can follow along exactly what we are going to type in here. And on the left hand side, you can see we've got a couple of values here, and we are going to test our AND function and our arguments to see if our value complies to those arguments. So let's get into this formula to see exactly how this works. So in the output, in your cell where you want to display your output of your AND function, you are simply going to type the equal sign and you are going to type the AND function, and you can include a bracket. So from here, you can see we have then our logical argument number 1 that we need to input into this function. So I'm going to reference to this value on the left hand side, and this will be the value that we are going to use throughout this function. You can switch this around when playing around with your AND function, but for now, we are simply going to use this value to see if it complies to our arguments. So our value of 85. So we know that this needs to be larger than 0. So it's simply going to type that as our logical argument number 1. And then we are going to insert a comma point to get to our logical argument number 2. So for this argument, I'm simply going to reference back to that cell again, and then I'm simply going to state that the value that we have here needs to be larger than 45. So this is our logical argument number 2. And then for our third argument, we know that this value that we have here needs to be smaller than 65. And when you finish your arguments, your logical arguments in your AND function, you can simply then just enter to close your bracket of this function. You do not need to enter any other values. As I said, these logical arguments carry on to a huge amount of numbers. So you can then just simply close your bracket to end your function. So as you can see, we've got our function typed out here, And now when you press enter, you can see the result of your AND function. So you can see we have this statement that refers to false. So remember the table that we have discussed before. We need to have in this function all of our logical arguments need to be true in order to get the output that states true. So as you guys can see, we have here our value is larger than 0, our value is larger than 45, but it is smaller or it is larger than 65. So this part of our function has returned a false. So in that sense, this logical part number 3 does not comply to our statement here, and then we get a false, and therefore our whole output will be false. So that is how the AND function works. And if we complete this, we can see that these two numbers have returned true, and as I've explained already, they conform to all our logical arguments. And this is how the AND function works. So you are going to test multiple conditions for your values or data that you have, and you are going to compare this. And if one of those logical arguments that you have entered does not conform to your specifications, it will be a false. So we need all of our arguments to be true in order for the AND function to return a true value. If you want to have either or, so let's say you have one argument that returns true, the next logical argument returns a false, and you want a true response, there are other logical functions that you can use, but this is how the AND function works in Microsoft Excel. And I hope this function is helpful to you guys. And if you have enjoyed this tutorial, please remember to smash the like button down below and subscribe to our channel so that you do not miss any of our new content. We will be creating a tutorial where we are going to explain how to combine multiple logical functions together to create something kind of awesome. So all of these functions can work in their separate ways, but once you start to combine logical functions in Microsoft Excel, you can achieve really cool stuff. So stay tuned for that video. We will be posting that video in a couple of weeks, so have your eye out for that. But thanks for watching, guys, and until next time, cheers.